Thank you for tuning into Literary Blend, a publishing podcast. I'm your host, Demi Michelle Schwartz. There's no perfect recipe for chasing a dream in the publishing industry, but I hope the conversations on this show give you the ingredients you need to bake yours into reality. So let's flip the page and get into this chapter of Literary Blend. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Literary Blend. The chapter for today is called A Deep Dive into Deadlines. And joining me on the show to plunge into the deep end of the deadlines pool is an author I'm delighted to know. Please welcome Bri Eberhart. Hi, Bri.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about this with you tonight.
Yeah, I'm so excited you're here today. How are you doing?
Oh, pretty good. It's been a long day. Just finished up work a little while ago, so excited to dive into this. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great, and I'm so excited to dive into this, like you said. But before we do that, I would love for you to share a little about yourself and your journey as an author so far.
So I am a self-published author. My debut, Strangers in Our Heads, came out last November. It's an upper young adult contemporary fantasy about magical misfits that are on the run, basically chased by the authorities. Society doesn't know that they exist, so they're just kind of in hiding. I have been writing uh, on and off pretty much since middle school, but I didn't take my writing seriously until like 2016. I am actually writing my fourth novel now, and I do query agents also for my adult work. So I'm kind of in the self published world and the querying world, and just hoping for a hybrid career someday.
That is a fabulous goal, and congratulations on the launch of Strangers in Our Heads. I was following along with all the fun when you're releasing the cover and doing all the fun things. I think it takes a lot to dive into self publishing, so that's a massive accomplishment.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a steep learning curve, but hopefully now book two will be a little bit easier since I kind of have a lay of the land now.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into our chat about deadlines. And the first thing I want to talk about is how we approach deadlines as authors, whether we're fans of them or not. So, are you a deadline fan or no?
I have to say that I am a fan of deadlines now. With the self publishing world, I obviously have a little bit more leeway when it comes to deadlines. I'm not in any contracts or anything like that with the publishing house. But I did set up a deadline with my editor, anyways, just so it can kind of give me a firm date in mind of when I want to get book two out and things like that. So I did implement it myself. I'm slight now that the deadline's approaching, I'm slightly regretting doing that to myself, but I know overall it's good that I have this date in place.
Yeah, I'm also a deadline fan, and we'll definitely be chatting more about self deadlines a lot later. But I think for me personally, I got introduced to writing novels with a deadline structure because when I was in my MFA program, we had to submit around 30 pages of our manuscript to our mentor and critique partners every month each semester. And so I grew up in that program, and when I was doing my undergrad years too with my bachelor's, doing the deadlines and doing the critiques and getting my work to someone when I had to get it to them. And so when I was done with the program and started doing things on my own, I just was in that headspace of having that structure. Because for me personally, I work better to a deadline because I know I can't screw around, I know I can't procrastinate it. And when I'm forced to sit down and do something and have a deadline in mind, it kind of takes the pressure off me a little bit, which is weird to say, but if I didn't have a deadline, then I would be second guessing every single word I was writing versus when there's a deadline in place, you can't really do that and you have to trust what you're writing.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with that. It's actually funny that you mentioned school. I do. I don't have my MFA, but I did go. I got my bachelor's in creative writing and literature. I'm used to like the deadlines that you said, having to turn in a certain amount of pages to your professors and whatnot. So that definitely does help a little bit get your head in that mindset. But I agree. If I didn't have a deadline, I would either procrastinate for the next 6 months or try to figure out what I'm doing with book two. So, yeah, once you have that date in place, it definitely helps you. It helps you keep stay on track.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. And I think too, being a self-published author like you, when you have readers who are anticipating the next book of a series, you don't want to keep them waiting 10 years for the sequel, you know? So I think it also is good for you as the author to make sure that you're leaving enough time between the releases for you to dedicate time to the project, get it edited and all that, but also not too long of a time where the readers kind of drift away because there's no sequel.
Yeah, definitely. That's a major thing I've kept in mind is because I just kind of remember now that like Strangers is no longer solely mine. I have invited readers into this world, so now I want to help do them justice as well as my characters. So having that, readers ask me when book two is coming out it's a nice compliment. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm resonating with that from the musical side because I'm an independent artist. And so I'm doing all the same things with choosing what music I'm releasing, when I'm releasing it, doing all the recording and the writing and everything. And I found too that there is a little bit of that pressure when you have supporters who want more of your content. You need to be mindful of how much time is in between. And with me, like, being pressured to release music and when's your next album? It's like, guys, let me record it. But like you do need to keep in mind that when you have supporters, you want to keep them around. And especially if you're not a huge name that, I don't know, you could be Rick Riordan and like not publish anything for 20 years and then drop a book and everyone would go crazy for it and hit the New York Times bestseller list and everything. But for authors and other creatives just starting out in their industries, I think it's really important to keep yourself in people's minds and continue to share content, especially in between those book releases and other releases, to keep readers engaged while also working toward your deadlines to get the next book ready for them.
Definitely. I also just want to say that I'm in awe of you because I know you have like 800 different plates you spin. So you are amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know how I do all the things. People are like, "How do you do all the things?" I don't know. So another point I wanted to chat about is realistic deadlines. So I'm sure you can definitely speak to this. When you were thinking about setting a deadline for your editor or just in mind a release date for your book when you had to get things done, how did you go about picking one that was realistic for you and fit your writing style and who you were as an author?
Yeah, so thankfully, since this isn't really my first book, I kind of know how I draft. I do want to say every draft is obviously different. Life circumstances change, the story changes. So, my first book I ever wrote took me like 2 years to write, but I had no idea what I was doing. It was before I joined Twitter, so I didn't have the writing community. Like, I was just off the rails. But then, Strangers was actually the second book I ever wrote and it only took me 4 months to draft. So I knew what an outline was at that point. I do the save the cat. I follow that beat sheet for the most part. And then my third book took me about a year to draft, but we also just moved into our house and we had home renovations and stuff, so that like backed up that timeline. So now that I know like book two, I'm going back to strangers. I don't have a lot of crazy stuff going on in my life besides just normal work and what trying to market book one. So I gave myself about 4 to 5 months to draft. That was my deadline set with my editor. So now that it's closer, I'm feeling the pressure. um, but since I worked with Jenya for book one as well, I know our like we go through 2 to 3 rounds of edits, so I kind of know that time frame in mind. So I don't have a set release date yet, but I am definitely looking at the fall again. But it helps, with book one experience, knowing what chunks of time I need for each step of the process.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy you brought that up because that's exactly right. I feel like, first of all, the more you write, the more you're going to understand yourself as a writer and understand how quickly you can do each thing. For me, I'm way quicker at revising than drafting. Like you, I wrote my first two in a longer period. I did them during my MFA program. The first one, I want to say it took me like a year or so to draft, and then with all the revisions and stuff, maybe like a year and a half, 2 years to like complete it. With my second one, it was more like a year and a couple months. And then my third and fourth one, I actually wrote during NaNoWriMo and I drafted the entire thing in November. And
Oh,
a
wow.
big thing was I was a plotter then. Like before, I was more of a plantster. Like I had the main plot points figured out, but I pantsed everything in between. But when I did NaNoWriMo, I did a complete chapter by chapter outline and I knew exactly what I was doing. So it was easy for me to do that. But just after doing that twice and like barely making it, I know for myself that it's a stretch doing it like that. Like it's hard for me, but I can manage it. But anything shorter than a month, absolutely not. Like I can never draft a book. But with revisions, like depending on what I have to do, like I just did some revisions for my agent and I got them done in like 3 days. And they were like developmental stuff and some line stuff, and it was really quick. And so I think just knowing who you are as a writer, how you are while drafting, and how you are doing edits, it allows you to set more realistic deadlines for yourself. Because the last thing that we need is to put extra pressure on ourselves by making us hit a deadline that's just not realistic for us.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Also, I agree. I think revisions are easier than drafting. Also, I keep telling myself that while I do drafting book two right now, is that I'm just gathering the sand to build the sandcastles later. So that's usually my mantra that I tell myself nightly when I'm in
Ah.
the thick of it.
Gather in the sand to build the sandcastles later? Oh my gosh, you're clearly a writer.
Yeah, it's just something to keep going. I hope it helps someone else out there someday too.
So, have you ever set a deadline for yourself and you missed it?
I wouldn't say like a hard deadline, um, but I would say that I every time I've tried to do nano myself, I've failed. So I don't know if that counts as a deadline, but I've never gotten to 50,000 words by the end of the month. So
Yeah, I wouldn't say I miss any extreme ones either, but I definitely feel down on myself when I'm doing little stuff. Like, say, I think, like, oh, okay, if I'm drafting a new story, it's like, oh, by the end of the week, I want to be done with chapter 10, but I only make it to 8. I definitely feel like bad about myself, but at the end of the day, like, life happens and it gets done eventually. And I think that's the other thing too, when you're looking at the big picture that I wanted to transition into now. When you're looking at a big picture and a deadline to submit your draft or your edits or whatever, you can definitely manage your time in that time frame the best it fits for you. So like if there's a time period where you're just like super busy or you're just not in the best headspace and you just can't get into it, and you don't write much that week, that's totally fine because the next week when you're like, re-energized and your creativity is back, then you can bang out double what you probably would have done if you've pushed through the period when you weren't really in the creative imaginative zone. And so I think when you're looking at a deadline, you can definitely look at, okay, say it's in 2 months. What days do I definitely have things going on and what weekends are super busy, and what's the spaces that I can dedicate to my writing and have buffer too. So if you have like these mini goals throughout but you don't hit one, that's fine because you can always make up for it in another week. And so looking at the big picture instead of all these little like, oh no, I missed it, I'm a terrible person, you can always make up for it in another week approaching that deadline.
yeah, you're totally right. I think allowing yourself that grace to take those breaks too is so important because I know I'm so guilty of that where I try like my main goal is I try to write between 8 to 10 p.m. every night since I work during the day. So that's usually like get your butt in the chair and draft some. But like you said, life happens and if sometimes if it's pulling teeth, just take the night off and refill the well and it, you'll make up for it and it'll be a lot better the next time you sit back down if you're not forcing yourself when you're not feeling well or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I like how you brought up how you have a time of day that works best for you. Because I think that goes back to knowing yourself as a writer too. If you know you work better at night, or that's the time of day you can dedicate toward your writing, or if you're someone who's most energized in the morning and you can wake up before work and get it done, or during a break or something like that, I think knowing yourself as a writer and recognizing where you're strongest and the time you can dedicate to your work, that will help you when you're reaching deadlines, because instead of you scrambling to try to find time, it's almost like you're building a writing schedule that you can stick to help you hit that deadline.
Yeah, definitely. I've been trying to treat I mean, I guess in a way it is a second job. I am a published author now, so I'm not drafting for fun anymore. But I very much treat it like a job, where I try to, like, 8 to 10 is the space that I figured out for myself, and I will do anything I can to try to fit that 8 to 10 in. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'll try again the next day, but just to hit that deadline, I do try to look at it more as a job that I'm doing now.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And I think that's the thing. We need to approach it as a job because that's what we want, right? We want to be full time authors. That's the dream.
Yes.
And the only way to get there is by treating it like a job before it is a job. And a lot of things are like that. Like the agents in the industry, they don't get paid until their authors sell books. And so a lot of us, like starting out, you're doing this with the intention of it becoming a bigger part of your life, and treating it like a job and finding ways of working it into your writing schedule and your life in general is really, really important. So, another point I wanted to talk about is when you're approaching this deadline, so you have one coming up, and just managing the anxiety and the stress that could come along with it. So, whenever your deadlines are approaching, the ones that you're setting for yourself, and you know that you owe your book to your editor and you want to hold up on that promise for professionalism reasons, and you also want to deliver a solid book that makes you proud and that shows that you really dedicated time to this project. How do you manage all of those emotions as that deadline approaches?
That's a good question. As of right now, I am basically just leaning on any writer friends who know that I'm kind of in this spot. I'm letting them give me all the pep talks in the world when I'm like, oh man, guys, like I'm feeling really bad about this. I don't know if I'm going to make it. And just let them kind of remind me of, it's all right. One day at a time, it'll get done. Just keep trudging along between them. Also, I do wanna say that I'm lucky in the sense that, it's just my husband and I, so, I definitely don't wanna speak for every writer out there. I can't imagine having kids to take care of or anything like that. But thankfully, I just have a very supportive husband that understands when I have to crawl into my writing cave to get something done, that he'll see me maybe an hour a day when I pop back out. So
Writer friends, though, are so important. And I think you just mentioned that you're leaning on your writer friends to help motivate you to keep going. That's fantastic because literally, no matter what step of the process you're on, having those people you can turn to who understand what you're going through and can cheer you on as you're reaching for that deadline is super, super important. So, yeah, all the author friends have them. They're great.
yeah. Yep, I don't know where I'd be without him at this point,
Mm-mm.
so
No, no, absolutely not. For me personally, whenever I'm getting close to a deadline, I try to incorporate breaks for myself in between, because whenever I'm approaching a deadline, that's where I'm really just like cranking it out. And if it's done and I'm going back through and polishing, I'm doing a lot of chapters at a time. And I'm the kind of person who will like sit at my desk and forget to eat sometimes because I'm so like in the story, and then I'm hungry and I'm like, Jimmy, why are you hungry? And it's like, oh wait, you totally skipped lunch and it's like 5 o'clock. It happens all the time. And so I think making a conscious decision to have breaks and give yourself like the night off or a day off on a weekend or something to just give yourself me time because yes, we love writing and we're treating it like a job, but at the same time, like working a job, you're not working at 7 days a week, 24/7, you know?
Yeah.
We need to take time for ourselves when these deadlines are coming up because if you don't, you're just going to stress yourself out even more, and that does not have good results when it comes to your creativity and your productivity.
Definitely. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all still human. So
Oh, yeah.
if you need those breaks, even if you absolutely love what you're doing, you still need a night to veg out and binge watch a movie or TV or something, just to
Yeah.
just to refill the well,
Mhm.
give your mind a break.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to wrap things up on our deadline chat, for any authors out there who are really struggling to hit deadlines, or maybe they don't write to deadlines and they would like a more structured writing process, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think you covered it really well earlier of just knowing yourself. I think that's where pretty much you just have to take a hard look at yourself and see, like, maybe so and so writes, the 5 a.m. club, but you just know that you cannot wake up before 8 a.m. Well, don't worry about it then. You don't have to be a part of the 5 a.m. club. If you're a night owl, write at night, or if you do your best work is, middle of the day, as soon as you log out of work, whatever the case is, just find your strong point, and I would say go from there, and then you can start building a schedule around your personal life, and then once you have that figured out, I think it'll be easier to implement deadlines. Because if you know, like, oh, I can easily hit 1,000 words a day, well, if you're writing 80,000 novel, you only need a couple months then.
Yeah.
Maybe give it 3 months to get those days off in there, but you can
Yeah.
start. Once you know your routine and what you can produce in a day, then you can kind of narrow down and pinpoint deadlines.
Right, absolutely. And one other point I wanted to make leading off of that is you definitely should not be comparing yourself to other authors. And with Twitter, especially when people are tweeting, oh, I drafted 50,000 words in 2 weeks, or OMG, I wrote 2,000 words in 30 minutes. Like, you can think, like, oh man, I'm so far behind, and people are getting their books done so much faster than me, and all of these things. But I think it's really important to recognize that everyone's different, everyone has different lives and different writing processes. And so the worst thing you can do is compare yourself to others and how quickly they get things done because you know yourself as an author and you know the time that you need to dedicate to your writing. And the most important point from all of this is that even if it takes you 2 months or 2 years to draft a book or to revise a book, that book is still getting done. And at the
Yes.
end of the day, no matter your process or other authors' processes, everyone's ending up with finished books. And that's the whole point. And so you shouldn't be comparing yourself to others' deadlines.
Definitely. It's a huge accomplishment. Not a lot of people do it. I know it seems like there's a ton of people out there because, we're all on the same social media. But in reality, like, if you really look at it, like, I'm the only writer I know, like, in person. I have a couple friends out like 2 hours away from me. So like I count them. But like in my personal day-to-day life, it's not like everyone's just, writing books all the time. So I think that everyone just needs to understand, no matter how long it takes, that it's a huge accomplishment that you're doing the thing. Keep writing. And also, to branch off your point, not to compare yourself to others. I agree. And I also would like to add not to compare yourself to yourself, because there's some nights where if I could write 5,000 words in a day, and that's huge. And then, like last night, I was lucky I churned out like 100 words. Like it
Yeah.
just was not happening.
Yeah.
So if you have a really good day, don't be bummed when you have a bad day. It happens.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing too is each part of your book isn't the same either. Like you could have a chapter that's pretty chill, but then you can have a chapter that's extremely emotional and tense, and depending on the emotions and the chapters and what's going on with the plot, some scenes are going to require more attention than others. And so I think that definitely plays a role as well. Perfect. Well, Brie, it was so fun having you on the show, and we've made it to your plot twist. Are you ready?
Oh man, I am.
All right. So This is a fun one for you. So, in Strangers in Our Heads, we know that Gemma and Theo know each other in their dreams before they realize that they're actually real people. So, how would you react if you had a dream about somebody and found out they were real?
Oh, man. Um, so I guess it really depends on the person I'm dreaming about. If it was a Gemma and Theo case, that would be Uh, pretty cool, I guess. Apologies to my husband, if that happened. Um, but that would be definitely mind-blowing. I would probably question if, I'm asleep again, if this is real life. But then I guess depending on if it's like an evil person that you're dreaming of or something, then I guess the scenario changes. So I think I would just pretty much at the end of the day just think I'm in the Matrix and think all of this is a simulation.
That's the answer to everything. Like, anytime something weird happens, my direct words are, "It was a glitch in the simulation. Let's just move on."
Yes, yes, I say that all the time myself too. Oh, that was a glitch in the matrix. Okay, moving on.
I think it'd be cool to kind of meet someone that you dreamed about, but then again, it'd be like, okay, did I like see them in passing somewhere and like didn't remember, or like what is going on? It'd be definitely a weird experience for sure. Well, Bri, it was lovely having you on the show. Can you please share with everybody where they can connect with you on social and also check out Strangers in Our Heads?
Yeah, so I am on Twitter and Instagram. The same handle. It's Bri_Eberhart, BRI_EBERHART. And then also my website is just BriEberhart.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And listeners, that is a wrap on this chapter of Literary Blend with Bri called A Deep Dive into Deadlines. If you enjoyed our conversation, please consider leaving Literary Blend a review and giving it 5 stars to help others just like you discover it. Also, if you have friends in the publishing industry you think would enjoy the show, please pass it along to them. Thank you for listening, and until we flip to the next chapter, happy reading and writing.